Now I'd like to take you on a quick tour of BackTrack Linux, and BackTrack is probably one of the more popular sets of security and penetration testing tools that hackers use. Now I'm using BackTrack 5 Release 3 for this course, although many of you who are familiar with BackTrack will know that there's an even newer version called Kali Linux that the folks at Offensive Security have put out, and it's more of a strict Debian-based type of distribution, and that's really why they did it. They wanted to go back to the old tried and true Debian system, whereas BackTrack 5 and previous versions of BackTrack have been pretty much based upon Ubuntu. Now you can use whichever one you like, and the reason I stick with BackTrack 5, especially for the purposes of this course, is that a lot of people are familiar with it. People are still using it, and it's still updated occasionally. You can still get the updates for it the same as you would for Kali or any other kind of Linux. It really depends upon what you learned and how you learned. And so I'm familiar with BackTrack, so I'm going to show you BackTrack. But feel free to download and use Kali as well. There are some differences in how Kali does what it does versus how BackTrack does. So with that, let me give you a quick tour. Let's drop to the command line here for a moment. And I want to show you just quickly where the tools are stored in BackTrack, the tools you really need to be concerned about. If you do an ls here, you're going to find in the root directory, you have all these directories here, and obviously some of these, if you're familiar with Linux, are standard: etc, lib, home, boot, bin, so forth. But there's another directory here that you need to be concerned about in BackTrack, and that's the pen test directory. So if we do a cd to pen test, and then let's do an ls here, and you can see that there are all kinds of directories here as well, and they're categorized basically based upon their function. You have backdoors, Bluetooth hacks, Cisco hacks, database tools, enumeration tools, exploits, passwords. You have some forensics tools in here as well, sniffers. You have web tools, wireless tools, and so forth. Now you can take the time, and I suggest you do, to go through each of these directories and kind of look and see what's in there. But one good thing about the way BackTrack is organized also is that it gives you the option of getting to the tool and the directory, and in some case running the tool under a GUI simply by using the menu here. And just to take you through this a little bit quickly, I'll show you a few things first before I go into the BackTrack directory. Since this is a version of Linux, basically based upon Ubuntu, you have some of the standard Linux tools. You have accessories, which you may have text editors and so forth. Screenshots, which are very useful during a pen test so you can prove that you were able to exploit something. The terminal, of course, and some other utilities. You also have graphics, internet, and in the internet utility folder, you have things like the Firefox, WCD Network Manager, and this is where you'll find ZenMap, which is a front-end GUI for Nmap, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You also have some Office tools and some other tools here as well. You have sound and video, system tools, and I have installed some of my own tools on here, and that's the great thing about BackTrack, is you can install your own tools on here and get what you want. For example, in the Office folder, there's not a lot really in there, so you might want to download and install LibreOffice or the older OpenOffice or whatever so that you have a fully functioning Office package with a word processor, a database, a spreadsheet, because actually some of the things you'll do in pen testing are more management related, so you'll need to record what you do, and maybe you might be writing reports or documents. So you can customize your version of BackTrack as much as you want, simply by using apt-get or the dpackage commands to get new software down and installing it. Let's take a look at the BackTrack folder, and there's a lot of information here. I'm not going to go through every single tool, but this is where you'll find a lot of your tools. Now, don't be fooled into thinking that all these are easy to use and easy to launch, because in some cases, all you're going to get is a shell prompt. It's actually just going to put you into the directory that the tool is in, and in some cases it will run the tool automatically just so you can get the help, get the command line switches. And that's okay. It shows you how to run the tool, and you're still running it from the command line anyway, but it's showing you exactly how to run the tool in terms of switches and options and so forth. So we've got several topics here: information gathering, and you'll find that a lot of these correspond to the methodologies that we talk about during this course: footprinting, enumeration, and so forth. And the tools are kind of laid out a little bit like that. You have information gathering tools, vulnerability assessment tools, exploitation, privilege escalation, And all of these are broken down into even more categories here, depending upon what you're looking to do. Privilege escalation, for example, is broken down into password attacks, privilege escalation media, protocol analysis, network sniffers, and so forth. So you'll expect to see Wireshark in here, which is a network sniffer. And actually, there are a lot of programs in here for each category. You may find one or two that you're familiar with, but I guarantee you, unless you've done some really extensive penetration testing, you're going to find a lot of tools in here that you never knew existed and you never knew what they did. And that's okay. Some of these tools you may not use on every single pen test. Some tools you may use frequently, like Wireshark. I use Wireshark for every test I ever do. So maintaining access, reverse engineering, some RFID tools. And that's another thing. Let me mention here that during the CEH, we'll be covering a lot of things and a lot of tools, but BackTrack has far more tools that even the CEH covers. A lot of these tools and their use are beyond the scope of the CEH course and exam. So we're not going to cover every single tool that BackTrack has, obviously. The CEH does not cover forensics, for example. So we're going to look at some of these tools as appropriate as we need to when we go through each segment of the course. So I just kind of wanted to give you an introduction to BackTrack, and I would recommend that you download it or Kali and become familiar with them for the course and definitely for the exam.